and welcome back for Season 2 of Vermont Film Essentials. My name is David Metzger.
And I'm Lincoln L. Hayes. Welcome to Season 2. This is exciting.
This is very exciting.
You picked a fantastic lineup for us for the second season, which is arbitrary. I mean, we just kind of said, we're going to take these months off and make seasons out of it. But I'm so glad that we started with The Godfather. But before we do that, I have a present for you.
Oh my God.
I got you these because we did Vertigo and because Jaws is your favorite movie.
Oh my
and we're
God.
doing it this season.
That's
Little
fantastic.
Pins, so you can add them on like I do. So shout outs to the Etsy shops that I bought those from, The Pin Bin and Vicious Delights, because I'm all about pins. I love them.
I got flair
some,
now.
You got some flair for the show. And I mean, I had to get Jaws. Even if we weren't doing the show, Jaws is all for David.
Perfect.
So there you go. Happy premiere of Season 2.
Yay. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Bam.
Yay.
Cool. So, as we said, our first film is The Godfather. When was the first time you saw Francis Ford Coppola's masterpiece?
Oh my God. I think we should start out by saying that, it's a film that everyone knows about, everyone hails as one of the greatest American films ever made. It's always on the list with Casablanca and Citizen Kane. Those are the three films that kind of vie for the top spot. And it seems like, if we were just going to lavish it with more praise in this hour, it would kind of be moot at this point. So I think we just got to just dive in and just explain and try to investigate why it is as great as it is and why it still endures.
Because it on paper, it shouldn't be. It's like Dr. Strangelove, where on paper, it should not be as good as it is, but it just becomes this piece of art. And watching it again, because I haven't seen this since college, and I love it. I loved it before I watched it again this time, but I hadn't seen it. And just watching it again and paying attention to it and doing the research, watching these kinds of movies and reading Wikipedia and IMDb while you're watching it really does help. It is kind of like a masterclass in cinema production, because you see things that you never noticed before, and we'll get into all of that. But this movie is just incredibly well made, well acted, well written, well shot. Like every piece of it is solid and very visually stunning and memorable and quotable and everything else. But when was the first time you saw it?
So it feels like a rites of passage film. Like it was obviously always around in the house, and my parents loved it, and they always spoke about it, quoted it. My father would do Brando, and
who doesn't?
There was a certain point where I just figured, like, I'm ready for The Godfather.
Yeah.
And I got it for Christmas. I watched it that day before the Christmas family dinner. And
just like, no more presents, I'm watching The Godfather.
Yeah, and like afterwards, I'm like, all right, I'm wearing a suit to dinner. I need a trench coat. I always describe this film as like the style of it and the nostalgia of it. It like feels like if you're in your grandfather's room and you open up his closet, you see all the old clothes and you're looking at him, you just want to try them on.
And you can just hear the theme song in your head whenever you're looking into the closet. You just hear those horns and just, it's gorgeous. First time I saw it was high school. In pieces, as we were talking about before we started recording. I had a class with my favorite high school teacher, who's also my theater teacher, and I had an independent study class with him, and it was my goal to get through all of the AFI, which was insane because it was a 42-minute class. So I watched this movie in 42-minute chunks.
Wow.
And then eventually in college I bought this box set and watched it a bunch then too, but I hadn't seen it since. So watching it again for this was really eye-opening. And I'm glad that I did, because there's so much that I forgot. This movie is so dense. And since I remember it in so many pieces, I'm like, oh, that's the first one, that's not the second one. And I get it all mixed up. Because Godfather 2 is also 2 discs, so it's super long. So to confuse the 2 stories is very easy to do. What was your, aside from, absolutely adoring it, what was your first impression? Did you think, I need to rewatch this again and analyze it? Did you think, I'm going to start living this lifestyle? And it influenced so many things after it, which I have some insane stats that I found regarding just the genre of mafia movies. I know that when I watched it, we talked like Brando and all that stuff, and this was when The Sopranos was currently airing. So then it was just like, well, now I have to watch all The Sopranos, and then you have to watch Goodfellas, and you have to just consume it all as much as possible.
Yourself. Yeah, you know, I couldn't even really comprehend any of the filmmaking of it and the craft of it when I first saw it. It was just, I knew I was watching something great.
Yeah.
I knew that there were scenes that just jumped out at me. Like still to this day when he assassinates the two guys in the restaurant is like one of my favorite scenes ever.
It's so wonderfully made.
The design of it and just that, you know, first of all, there's the scene before it where he's prepping him and saying like, this is what you're gonna do. So now throughout the whole scene, you're just like, when is he gonna get up and go to the,
when's he gonna do it?
Then he goes and does it. And it's like, oh my God, he can't find the gun.
Yeah.
He finds the gun.
His moment of panic when he's looking for the gun is so real. And you're just like, oh no, what's he gonna do? Watching it this time, it flashed in my head the scene in Inglourious Bastards in the bar.
Yep.
Where now as the audience, you're watching it, you know what's gonna happen, you're just so tense, and you're like, oh my God, oh, here it comes. Oh.
And the way that they use the sound in that scene where they push on his face and the subway cart goes by and the screeching metal and you just know exactly what he's thinking, how tense he is, and then it just happens and the mists of blood that happen. This movie uses and shows violence in such a unique way. And it really is kind of a masterclass in how you use violence because there's always some little strange detail about it. Like the fact that when Sterling Hayden gets shot in the neck and then he gets shot in the forehead and the forehead just kind of sits there for a little bit and he's just kind of choking and then he drops. Those mists of blood. At the end during the assassination, when Mo Green puts on his glasses and it gets shot through the eye.
Which I read was based on an actual incident that happened with a crime guy. He got shot in the eye, but he didn't wear glasses, but they used that for the effect so that they could have the blood packet and shatter and then spew out of his eye like that. I feel like I had some judgment of this movie the first time I watched it or when I was watching it in college and thinking like, oh, those effects look kind of cheap and hokey or whatever. But of course, this is like the first of these kinds of movies to do anything. So you have to remember that like Evil Dead or anything like that, where you look at it now and you're like, wow, those effects aren't great. This is the first time.
Right.
That's the first time. The effect when he gets shot in the forehead is they have a blood packet on his head, they put a prosthetic over it, and then a piece of fishing line, and they pull it away, and that's how you get and then the blood trickle down. Brilliant.
So easy too.
And then there's so many things that they do now, but that's such a great way to do it.
Right.
And the way that Sonny is killed, so many squibs. The tech putting on the squibs says to him, I've never put this many squibs on somebody before. And James Caan says, you didn't need to tell me that right now. But he's shot, I don't know how many times. Just the level of detail and the amount of passion that went into this for something that probably wouldn't have gotten made. Like Paramount was very iffy on this. And it's fascinating to me, these movies that are so seminal and important and like legendary films, so many of them almost didn't get made because they're like, Or the backstory and the production is so tumultuous that, you know, it's a wonder it did get made at all. I think people also forget that it's a very commercial American genre story. Yeah.
It's basically a crime film. But I think what Coppola was so enamored with and what kind of spoke to him about it was, one, he wanted to make a film that spoke about American capitalism.
Yeah.
But he also just, at the end of the day, it's a family. And anyone who watches this film can connect with it in that way. Every arc, every decision, every little character beat is all about that theme of family.
You can find yourself somewhere in the Corleone family. The fact that Sonny is so protective of Connie, the fact that he's jealous of Tom Hagen because he's adopted into the family, but he seems to have more power than him. And the scene when he yells at him and he berates him, it's just like, dude, no, that's your brother. You're just being petty now.
Right.
And the way that he's trying to protect Michael and keep him out of it, and the way that Michael keeps Kay out of it, And then when he comes back to the States and he just like immediately, there's so many things about Michael's character that I never really got until this viewing. Like he's against getting involved. He doesn't want to be a part of the family. But then when there's the attempt on his father's life, and then when he's punched by the captain, and then like that's what flips for him. When he's like, I need to be involved now. I need to take care of this.
And not only that, like he's one of the most complex characters in all of American film.
Yeah.
And the way that Coppola charts that throughout the course of the story, if you're not paying attention, it seems like out of nowhere he turns into this evil guy.
And that's how I felt for so long.
But then, like, at the beginning of the movie, he's at the wedding, he's in his Marine uniform, he's already an outsider, and he's talking to Kay, he's telling all these stories, and he's like, that's my family, that's not me. And then father gets assassinated,
or the attempt.
He's put into the position to act. He does. Yeah. And there's a brilliant moment where he lights the cigarette for the guy, and he just notices how still his hand is. And that stillness is just in him, and it's a part of him. And then when he's at his father's bedside, he's saying to him, like, I'm with you now. And it's just throughout that whole thing, it's just like, this is my family, it's not me. I'm with you now. And then at the end, I'm shutting the door on everything else in my life, and it's all about the family business. It's brilliant.
It's so well made, so well put together. Every character is thoroughly defined, so fleshed out. Like even Fredo has such little screen time in this film. He's obviously a much bigger part of Godfather 2. But you know exactly where he fits. You know exactly his role. And then when we get to Vegas and you see that he's there and he's like Mo Green's little lackey, and you're like, okay, I completely understand where older brother Fredo fits into this equation. And that's got to be frustrating. Yeah. And that's got to be frustrating for him too, that now his little brother Mikey is taking over the family business and blah, blah, blah. And it's so great.
I just want to talk about the opening, the wedding scene.
Yeah.
Because so much is done in that. And I love the conceit when a movie has a first act that is either takes place at one event or takes place over the course of one day or night. Yeah. And first you get that opening scene that, I Believe in America speech, and it's just that slow pullback. But every character is introduced in this one big chunk. And it
doesn't feel like an exposition dump either.
It doesn't.
There's only one line that feels like, here's a plate of exposition, and it's when Tom Hagen says, no Sicilian can deny a request on his daughter's wedding day. And that's only because...
Only to explain that line of people and what the hell is going on.
Exactly, and that explains it to the audience who probably isn't Sicilian and doesn't have that. But if you've seen the film before, it seems superfluous. But again, that's, how many years later, 40 years later, that we're talking about it.
Right. But, Brando's introduction, he's this sinister guy behind the desk that does all these powerful, evil things, but he's playing with a cat.
Yeah.
Sonny has his moment with the camera guy where he smashes the camera, and then he gives him money.
And then flips money on him, and then he goes off with the bridesmaid. So you're like, okay, we know what your character's like too.
Right. Michael's in the Marine uniform. That's my family, not me. Fredo is the goof, so he comes over and he's drunk and he's sloppy and he's trying to flirt with Kay. Kay herself is just kind of looking around and just one, she's enamored with Michael. But just listening to these stories, and it's just like you can see it in her face. I mean, I love Diane Keaton so much, but on her face you can just read that it's like, I love you, I want to be with you, but
this is terrifying.
This is a lot.
I am out of my depth.
Duvall, you get the idea that he's not quite part of the family, but he's the professional lawyer. Yeah. And everything that he speaks, he's so professional, he's so poised. There's also laying pipe that's going to pay off later in terms of Luca Brasi. So he has that funny thing where he's rehearsing the thing outside, and you're laughing, and you laugh with him, and you care for him because you're laughing. And then when he gets whacked, it has such an impact because
you're just like, no, not him. He was so sweet.
Right.
as the muscle of the Corleone family. You also have Clemenza out there dancing and drinking the wine out of the pitcher.
Yep. The little girl on the
feet, dancing with Abe Vigoda. Yeah, everyone. You're right. Everyone is introduced in that one scene. I never put it together that way. Even the main bad guy is at the wedding, and you know exactly what he's about because he gets his picture taken. He's like, "No, get that picture. No, it's not happening."
Right.
Yeah, fun little piece of trivia. Do you know the story of that kitten in that scene?
Coppola just gave it to him.
There was a stray cat on the Paramount lot, and he found it, and he's like, "Here," and the cat just loved the pets so much, and that's why he's just all over Brando to the point where he's purring so loud they had to dub his audio because his dialogue they couldn't hear it. And they're like, "Well, let's do that again."
That's great.
And with Luca Brasi and his rehearsing of his speech, that came about because of his own nervousness in the scene with Brando. He's doing the dialogue and he flubs the dialogue, and then it's when he's like, on the day of your daughter's wedding, that was the actor going, I messed up, because he was so nervous to be performing with Brando.
Right.
That Coppola loved it, and he's like, well, all right, well, we're going to add in this part where you're rehearsing your speech outside. It's great. So many pieces, so many little tiny pieces of the puzzle, and then it just is a springboard from there. And then with the picture, he doesn't want to take the picture until Michael's there. And then when Michael is there, he wants Kay there because Kay is his life.
Right.
And then eventually, she's not his life anymore. Yeah. We should talk about the novel, at least. Mario Puzo's novel, The Godfather, wasn't even completed when they optioned it from him. They had I think they had a 20-page, not even a draft yet, just like a mock-up of what he was going to do. And then he and Coppola worked on the script extensively together, and this was really the first mafia movie. And the insane stat that I read was, since this movie came out, there's been almost 300 mafia movies that have been made about Italian-American, the Cosa Nostra, and specifically the Italian mafia. And that's an average of about 9 a year. It's its own subgenre. Like, there's crime, and then there's mafia movies, and it's because of The Godfather.
Right.
And then there's 2 more Godfathers. So there you go. It's crazy.
Have you ever watched the special feature on this with the Notebook, where he goes over how he broke down the script?
Oh, I don't think so.
Oh my God! So he has a thing. It's called the Godfather Notebook, and what he did was he took the script and he shrunk it down and basically made kind of like a prompt book, and he had all these large margins. And he went through it, and he would make all these little notes and everything. But then he broke it down even further, and he had something that he broke down and said, like, here's a synopsis of the scene. He had a section called The Times, where he talked about like why it's important that it takes place in the 40s at this moment. What are the details of the 40s that we can get into this scene? He had the core, which is like what this scene is really about. And then he had style and imagery, where he would make notes like, the girl dancing on the feet of, the bag of money, the camera, all these little details, the blood mist that he wanted to get. And then at the end of that, he would put pitfalls and like what's the bad version of this scene? Right. What are mistakes that I could make? I can't have any Italian in this film talking like I did this, right? Or being, untruthful. And it's just like he goes through this whole thing, and you're like, that is why this film is so great, because he cared so much about it. He knew it inside and out. He knew exactly what he wanted to put on screen. But again, like at the end of the day, like he knew it so well and knew that if I just stick to this theme of family, everything else is subservient to that. Yeah. So that when things came up, like, this guy's flubbing the lines, he can say, I'm going to put that in there because, we all get nervous. Yeah. I have a nervous friend. I have a nervous family member. They can't talk. If it's their turn to talk at the table, they're flubbing. So that's just going to add to the...
It's great.
It's awesome.
Especially since you are such a big, scary man. For you to be nervous is endearing. Yeah. That humanizes you in a way that just giving you, dialogue or anything like that couldn't. And it humanizes Abe Vigoda to see him dancing with the little girl. It humanizes Clemenza to see him out there dancing and having a great time. And then he tells the guy, go do your job. They're at a party, but at the same time, they have to be professional, and they have to protect the family. Right. It's fascinating. You mentioned the camera bit with James Caan throwing the camera down. He improvised that. And the poor extra, he was just hired to be a photographer. And then here's James Caan throwing you around and smashing your camera on the ground. So his reaction of like, ah, is genuine. And then he just throws the money at him because he's like, where I come from, you break something, you buy it. Which I just think is James Caan being ridiculous. He seems, from what I've read, he seemed to be even more difficult on this film than Marlon Brando was.
Right.
And there was actually there was an addendum or whatever in his contract from Paramount. Like, they didn't want him on this film because he had such a poor reputation at that time for being difficult and, you know, making everything fall behind and things like that. So they said that that Coppola could hire him, but he had to be hired at a lower salary, and there had to be a bond to ensure that he didn't bring the production in over budget or late. And then the production ended up being early and under budget. So it was kind of like Brando being like, I'm a professional, deal with it.
Right.
But then everything that I've read about James Caan is that, you know, he didn't like this actor, he didn't like that actor, he was difficult in this scene or that scene. It's like, James, what are you doing, bro?
He actually like really beat
yeah.
the guy that was playing. He broke his rib when he threw the garbage can at him.
Yeah.
But I think like those things I hear and I'm like, yeah, but on screen, like that's his character, like that he's the hothead.
Yeah.
And it comes through so much so that like you love him even though he is
deplorable,
a jerk.
Yeah.
And you know, he's funny, he jokes around, he does the things that like
the boisterous big brother would do. Yeah.
And then at the end when he gets it, you're like, oh.
Imagine how different things would go if he would the head of the family instead of Michael.
Right.
I mean, they definitely wouldn't go to Vegas. They would get into the drug trade. And that's also something that's crazy to think about watching it now, is how pro-drugs he and Tom Hagen are. They're just like, this is what we need to do. This is the future. We got to get into this. And you're just like, oh, man, no, don't do that. Please don't. But drugs are bad. Drugs are bad. There's just so many things to talk about in this film. One that I definitely want to mention, the Italian-American Civil Rights League were very nervous when this movie was getting made, and they were up in arms, as they were rightfully to be, saying, if you're going to do this, you have to do it right. You can't just reduce these Italian-Americans to stereotypes. So they insisted that all references to the Mafia and the Cosa Nostra were removed. And in the book, there's no mentions of the Cosa Nostra at all. And then there's only 2 mentions of the Mafia, so that was very easy for them to remove. And then actually, if you think about the way that the story is constructed, it's not really about organized crime. It's about corruption. Right. And it's about a corruption within the society, and they're just taking advantage of that corruption for their own benefit. Like I guess there's the one scene where he asks him to kill the guy, but he never says, yes, I will kill the guy. It's more of an allusion to everything that they're going to do. And that's, you know, make him an offer he can't refuse and those kinds of things. So it's never really about the crime. It's about respect and honor. Right. And that's the heart of this movie.
And that's what adds to, like, it's got that Shakespearean tragedy about it. And it feels, you know, it's the one film that really feels like a great novel in the fact that, like, you know, you can keep on going back to it, and you're gonna see more. You're gonna feel more. Yep. And there's just so many different layers to it. And I remember, you know, the first time I saw it, I remember thinking that the whole Italy section. I hate admitting this, but I felt like the Italy section was, you know, unnecessary. Yeah. Or it's like, you know, I don't, you know, why are we in Italy? I want to be back in the city. I want to know what.
Yeah. I want to follow the family.
But now I see, like, you know, that is, not only does it add to Michael's arc, but he falls in love. He falls in love with this beautiful girl, and then she gets murdered right in front of him.
Yeah.
And that even that draws him even deeper into the darkness that's inside himself. And it works like every great American tragedy. It works on so many different levels, and there's so many different things that happen over the course of the story that lead to the inevitable that's going to happen at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just so perfect.
It is, really is. And I felt the same way about the Italy stuff. I always felt that it was kind of out of place or that it dragged. But really, you need both sides of that coin, because here's Michael coming back. He's a war hero. Everybody keeps calling him a war hero. And you forget that he was a Marine. So he has killed.
Right.
But it's been, like Sonny says, it's not a guy a mile away. It's right up in your face, and then bada bing, you get blood over your Ivy League suit. And since he calls him college boy, you forget that he's a Marine. Like, there are so many things that you forget unless you really, really pay attention and really study what's happening in front of you.
And that makes sense. Like, anyone who says, like, oh, his father gets shot, and then all of a sudden he turns into this, cold-blooded killer. It's like, well, he was trained to be that, just in a different way.
Yeah. He's trained to defend his country. Now his country is his family.
Right.
So he's stepping up as a Marine and saying, I'm going to take charge.
Right.
And the captain made it personal when he assaulted him. And he saved his father's life a second time. Like, there's just so many layers to it. It isn't just this happens and then he becomes the Godfather. It's a lot of little steps in there of him, working with a nurse and saving his father and moving him rooms and pretending to be, a guard outside with Enzo. That poor guy, he'd never acted on screen before. They shot that out of sequence. So the stuff where he's outside and his hands are shaking, that's because he's nervous to be on camera. Right. And it just works so well for the character. And like you said, I never noticed the lighter and the steady hand thing. Like, he's terrified, but Michael's not, because he's in control and he's doing what he needs to do. And just the subtlety of opening the jacket and reaching in to nothing. Right. But the guys are like, let's go, let's get out of here. Right. So effective. And he stands his ground against the captain, and then he punches him in the face, and man, just all of it.
And and that whole scene when he's with Sonny and Tom, and he's trying to plan this whole hit on them, and they're laughing at him.
Yeah.
And then he comes up with this ultimate plan.
Yeah.
And it's so, like, he's very calm about it, and it's very calculating, and you see it unfold right before your eyes.
And the way that scene is shot is gorgeous, because you don't even see Michael at first. He's in the chair, and then Tom moves away, and then it's a reveal that he's sitting there, and he's just sitting there cross-legged, and his face is still messed up because he got his cheek broken, right?
Right.
Cheekbone broken. And he's sitting there, and he's furious. He's so angry that this is happening. And his justification for killing the captain is a noble justification for it. And they're like, we can't just go around killing cops. And he's like, he's not just a cop. He's a dirty cop. He's a corrupt cop. He's a murderer. Like, he deserves it,
right? Cop
or no.
That's a great story.
It just grows, and it's so well written and it's so well performed, because that could easily be a light bulb moment. Why don't we just kill both of them? Cut to that scene and then it happens. Right. No, he's processing it, and he's coming up with each of these individual ideas, and it's like, okay, we do this, and then if we can't control it, then we can control these things. What variables can we control? And we're going to control those to the utmost degree until we can achieve this.
And over the course of the story, like that, like if that's his moment, like if the way Michael responds to being angry versus how Sonny responds to being angry,
right,
versus how Tom responds, versus how Fredo would respond,
right,
you see all of that play out, and in the end, you know why Michael is the one. Yeah,
because like you said, each time one of them reacts, Sonny reacts by beating up Carlo,
right,
in a very public way. Fredo responds by complaining to somebody else and trying to demand, Tom, do something. And Tom's like, I can't do anything. I'm not even the consigliere anymore. This is Michael's decision, and that's what it's going to be. Tom goes to the Don. He goes to Vito, and he's like, you do something. And he's like, it's not me anymore. It's Michael. Because he did the job and he made that sacrifice, because then he just has to disappear for a year or more. The timeline of this film is a little bit confusing. It's like it takes over like 9 years, and once he gets back from Sicily, the years kind of jump a little bit. But for the most part, that first half is pretty true to real events.
Right, and like when he gets back from Italy, there's a really kind of a bold move where he goes to visit Kay, and through their dialogue, you see that you come to understand that he's been back for a year, and he's just now seeing her. And I know that there's been people speaking about how Kay, the character in general, gets kind of shortchanged in both films.
Yeah.
But I think every time that she's on screen, she holds her own, and she adds an element to it, and she just adds to the complexity of Michael, because even though he fell in love with Italy, Kay is the one that really had him.
Yeah.
It was the first love. And when he comes back and he sees her, and you realize that it's taken a year for him to do so, you know that he's not completely gone, and there is perhaps still a heart to Michael. But then that just kind of leads to how it just stops beating over the course of the rest of the film.
But then it also asks the question of, is he getting back with Kay to have something legitimate in his life,
or a son?
Yeah, or to get an heir, because he needs to do that as well. He has to carry on the name, because Sonny's gone, Fredo's not going to do squat, and Tom isn't blood. So he is the patriarch now. And, it's kind of lazy. It's kind of a cop-out on his part to be like, oh, well, I'll just go get my college girlfriend, and then we'll get married, and that'll be fine, rather than being like, I should meet someone new. But I love that scene where he's talking to Kay, and he's saying, my father's no different than any other powerful man. And she goes, Michael, you're so naive. Politicians and presidents don't have men killed.
Who's being naive?
Now who's being naive, Kay? And it's such a simple line, but it speaks volumes, because she's the audience proxy, where you're like, no, your dad is a crime boss. You're murdering people. This isn't right. And he's like, who's to say what's right? We're just coming about it in a different way.
Right.
Why is our way different than your way?
You mentioned the lighting, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the cinematography of Gordon Willis.
Oh my God. There was something that I learned, and now I can never unsee it, and it is so perfect. He decided that he wanted all of the shots to look the same. So he has the camera at 4 feet high. And aside from the aerial shot when Vito's being assassinated, or the attempt on his life, everything is 4 feet high. Everything. It's incredible. And once you see it, you're just like, wow, this is too. And this scene, I noticed it first in the hospital scene, where Vito's in the bed, because people are coming and going in front of the camera, and we'll change angles and things like that, but we always come back to that same height. We always feel like we're in the same place. The other scene that I noticed, it was when they were all sitting around the table, and it's the Corleone children with their significant others and the mother. And the mother has her back to the camera, and the camera kind of pans around behind her a little bit, and then it stays on her right. And the entire scene is shot from that perspective, and she doesn't speak except for the one line where she tells them not to talk about family business at the table with the children there. Because this is her table. These are her children. She's still the matriarch of this family, and she's just going to let things happen around her. And not having children, I don't know what this is like to just sit and observe and listen. But when you think about that scene from her perspective, here are her children. This is her progeny. This is her lineage. This is everything her and Vito have worked for their entire lives. And they're talking about protecting that. They're talking about taking the lead in moving on, and hopefully allowing her and Vito to take a step back and enjoy their twilight years. And then once they take it too far, then she's got to be like, nope, that's not how we do it. And then like, okay, sorry, Mom, sorry. That scene was so powerful. That was one of the ones where I sat forward and I was like, oh, I have so much more appreciation for this now.
And again, that whole thing, the way, like, how he knew to put the camera right there, why that scene has the impact that it does, is that it all comes back to family.
Yeah. Because imagine if that scene is like chopped up and we have different things, it's not going to be as effective. We're not going to have that same perspective of this isn't how the family does it.
It's funny you mentioned the overhead shot of Vito getting shot and the oranges spilling over. That was a fight between him and Gordon Willis, because Gordon Willis was the one that said, like, you know, whose point of view is this? This shot doesn't make sense.
Right.
And Coppola was like, it's my point of view. It's Orson Welles' point of view. So just give me the shot that I'm asking for. And he's like, all right, but I'm telling you right now, you're breaking the story. You know, and you know, it's one of those conversations where it's like, you know, it's hard to ascertain like who's really right and who's really wrong.
Yeah.
Because I actually like that overhead shot and seeing the oranges spill over.
Well, it's a completely new perspective for us, and, and it's the God point of view.
Right.
Here is this man being gunned down. Will he make it or won't he? And poor Fredo in that scene. He just fumbles with the gun, and then he's just. And watching those things, I always have to remember that he's a human being. So he is going to be emotional. It's his fault that his father's been shot. He's in shock. He's all these other things. Because my first thought is, well, do something, you idiot. But you can't. You're in shock. It's, you know, that's how it goes. And the imagery of the oranges and the omen that they represent. We meant to bring oranges today.
As soon as I said it, I'm like,
You forgot the oranges.
I have oranges. They're in my car.
Oh.
Even worse.
Pause. We'll go get them. No. And that scene also always feels like it's later in the movie for me. Like, I always forget that the attempt is so soon in the film, because that's really the catalyst for everything in the movie. We have the wedding scene, which is iconic and everybody knows it, and then there's the attempt, and then he's in the hospital, and then Michael protects him, then Michael gets punched, then Michael assassinates, and then Michael leaves. Like, all of that is like the first two acts.
Yep.
And since it's such a long movie, you forget that there's so much more that happens too.
Right. And, like, you know, the one thing about that is that in Coppola's notebook, he puts in that scene, in that assassination scene, that this is his homage to Hitchcock's Psycho, where, you know, we think that the Don is the main character of the story.
Right.
But then he gets shot, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And that's when the perspective shifts to Al Pacino, just like Marion in Psycho shifted to Anthony Perkins. And one, just seeing how a filmmaker takes from another filmmaker and takes from another film, but also during that scene, you know, the pacing of the film. The reason why that scene seems like it's like it should be later, or always feels like it's going to be later. The pacing of this film, it's deliberate and it's methodical, but I swear, as I watch it now, it never seems boring.
Ever.
And it never seems like there's a moment that shouldn't be there. And it's great that, like, that whole wedding scene is like the first half hour. So that's the first act.
Right.
And then we get into this first movement, and that's when the assassination happens. And then we have Michael's escape to Sicily, and that's another movement. It's so full of these great set pieces, and these set pieces. I think it's also
because the assassination attempt feels like the point of no return. Right. But it's not. It's just the inciting. It's the inciting incident. Right. Which is nuts. How are we going to start out this film? Oh, we're going to almost kill the main character. I'm sorry, what? How does that work? Oh, and then it shifts to Al Pacino, like you said, and then he becomes the new focus of the film. And even the Italy stuff now is just so beautiful and so, you know, pastoral and scenic, and everything about it is so great. And it's him trying to have a new life, but still pining for his old life and trying to move on and all these other things. And you also get to see him developing into who he will become. Like the scene where he talks to Apollonia's father is such a well done scene, because the guy storms off and they're all like, we should go, because he's super pissed. And he's like, no, wait, I want to talk to him. Translate for me. That was originally, he was supposed to do all of that in Sicilian, but he didn't have a handle on the language well enough to do that full monologue, so they just like, Fabrizio, translate for me. and then just the respect that the man has for the way that he approaches it, and you know that Michael's had that his entire life, so none of that seems forced or like alien to him. It's just he's embracing who he is, and he tried to push that away by going into the Marines. I mean, he probably didn't have a choice. He was probably drafted. But being in the Marines and going to college and doing all of that, but ultimately it comes back to, no, my place is with my family and doing this. And even though I may have been opposed to it, I understand its necessity. Just the lighting in the film too, like all of the scenes in the house are so dark, and you feel like you're just kind of claustrophobic in here. And then when we're in Sicily, it's so bright and so pretty, and the shots are wider so you can see more of it. Also to give it the authenticity of being there, but also to feel like a juxtaposition to the New York lifestyle of like, here we are in this beautiful country instead of being in, you know, downtown on Mott Street and all of that.
And they even play with that in the beginning, because when we're in that opening scene in the room, it's very dark. You're only seeing just parts of their faces. And then we go to the wedding and everything's all blown out and happy, and you know, all the festivities that are happening, and just the way that they play with that light and darkness. There's also a great bit of irony with the story is that Michael, and they flesh this out even in Godfather Part 2, but that Michael has spent the first part of his life trying to alienate himself from his family by choice. And then at the moment when he decides to go with his family, he alienates himself even further from everyone he loves.
Yeah.
It's great.
I want to talk about the awards that this movie won, because there are a lot. Won Best Picture and Best Actor, though that was the year Marlon Brando refused to accept it, and sent the Native American woman in his stead to deliver that speech. It won Best Adapted Screenplay, and I thought this was really interesting. I've never heard of this before, but I guess it's happened a couple times. It was nominated for Best Dramatic Score, which the nomination was then revoked because part of basically the love theme from this film is taken from another piece of music that the composer wrote, which I would really love if you could drop that music in during this little section of it, because you listen to it, and like I found an article and I shared it with you, and there's a certain time code in the song where it goes right into the Godfather theme, but it's upbeat and it's more festive and it's kind of like, but then you slow it down and it's more, and then you're just like, well, that's the Godfather theme right there.
And it's one of those things. I think it happened with There Will Be Blood too, with Johnny Greenwood not being able to be nominated for his score because he used a piece of music that was from another film. Stupid.
I mean, it makes sense. It's not original.
I know, but still.
Also won BAFTA for Best Film Music, Directors Guild Award for Best Directorial Achievement, Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture Director, Actor for both Brando and Pacino, Supporting Actor from James Caan, Screenplay Score. It also won a Grammy, and it won Best Adapted Screenplay from the Writers Guild. Pacino actually refused his nomination, I read, because he was nominated for Supporting Actor, and he was furious that he wasn't nominated for Best Actor as well, because actually, I never even put the math together, but Brando only spends about a third of the film on screen. The rest of the time, he's either incapacitated or we're with Michael in Sicily. So yes, I understand that he gets Best Actor, but he's only in a third of the movie. It's kind of like Judi Dench in Shakespeare in Love, where it's like, you were in this movie for what, 8 minutes? And I really tried to focus in on the performances on this one too, because it's been so long since I've seen it. And by now you know Brando's performance. You know him playing the Godfather. But I really had to like take all that preconceived stuff away and really pay attention to it. And the scene when he takes Sonny to the mortician, he's unbelievably good in that scene. He's acting his face off so well. And you know, he's got the appliance in his mouth for the which I've actually seen. They have that at the Museum of the Moving Image in New York City, and I've seen it, and I was like, oh, that's the thing. That's really cool. But so much of his performance is now legend that you don't always see the work that he's doing. And he is doing such a great job. The scene when him and Michael are talking about in the third act, when he's like, whoever comes to you is going to be the traitor. He's so fantastic in that scene because he's old and he's tired and he's just trying to impart knowledge onto his son so he can hopefully not make the same mistakes. And then when he's like, I didn't want this for you. Yeah, Sonny, sure, because he's a hothead and whatever, but I wanted you to be away from this. And that's part of the tragedy, the like Shakespearean tragedy of it, is like, here is this Falstaff kind of King Lear character who doesn't want this for his family, and then his son comes in and is better at it than he is. And you're just like, I don't want you to be this. I want you to be more. But he is more. He's just more of kind of the same. And Al Pacino almost didn't get the part because he was too short.
Right. I don't know. Like he had such trouble casting this movie. You know, they didn't want Brando. I mean, basically the whole thing about Johnny Fontaine will never be in this production is basically what they did with him and Brando. And then they gave him grief about Pacino. I think James Caan they were okay with, except for like the beef that they had with his shenanigans. But like every step of the way, like even with out of a fluke, he just kind of cast his sister Talia Shire and said like they're looking for someone pretty, but I think this character is more like kind of like very shrill and
mousy.
And they gave her, and Robert Evans is like I love her. This is the best casting decision you've made since. And then Brando becomes the greatest choice. Then Pacino becomes the greatest choice. You can't separate any of the actors from the performances, and they make this film. And it's amazing how much he had to fight, even at the point where like there's the horror stories about how for the first 2 or 3 weeks there were whispers that he was going to get fired. And then they shot the Michael assassinating Sollozzo and the cop, and after they saw that scene, they're like, okay, you got something.
You get it. This makes sense. Something that going along with what I said earlier about all of the culture that this has created. I mean, it created Goodfellas. It created The Sopranos. It also influenced actual gangsters. I read stories of certain guys that were in crime families. Like, let's one guy, he was very like boisterous and he swore a lot and just used terrible grammar. And then he saw The Godfather, and then all of a sudden he started speaking more articulately and philosophizing about things. And you see these guys who all of a sudden are starting to wear really sharp suits and fedoras and all of this stuff. And it's like this influenced the underground culture of organized crime, because they're like, yeah, that's what we want. That's the best we can be within our own society. There was one guy who said that he watched The Godfather and he walked out thinking, that's my life. That's everything that I could want to be within this. Like, because if you're in organized crime, you climb. You wanna get to the top, and you want to be the best, both for your own safety, but also for the respect and all of that other stuff. And it's like that's it. They nailed it.
Yeah, this film is in the zeitgeist like no other film ever. In terms of like even through like someone could go their whole life not seeing The Godfather. And through cultural osmosis, they will know lines, they will know the characters, they will know the story, they will know bits of information. There's not one of my favorite movies, but You've Got Mail that has that great scene where he's talking about The Godfather, and it's like it's the answer to every question. And it is like there's bosses that I've had that have thrown out lines and used little bits of wisdom from this movie. And use it as like dogma for themselves. And again, like this vies with Citizen Kane and Casablanca. I think that this film, more so than those other two films, touches more people.
Oh, of course.
Than
absolutely.
Because like,
of those three, this is my top.
Right.
And Citizen Kane is third.
But I mean, like even like Casablanca, like maybe you know a couple of lines and you know
Sure.
like some but you don't get.
But you don't know the story of that without seeing it. You don't know that it's Nazis in Argentina. You know that it's Bogart, and there's the scene with the plane at the end, and that's it.
And it's also crazy to think about. It's also crazy to think about that. 1972 is not that long ago in the grand scheme of things, and it felt like, this movie came out and was just like it came out and it was great.
Yeah.
Wasn't really the case in terms of like there were not so flattering reviews that came out, and then even at the Academy Awards it only won 4 awards because the top movie of that year to everyone's mind was Cabaret, and that was nominated for more awards and didn't win any, because this one won 4 of them. But Bob Fosse ended up winning Best Director over Coppola for Cabaret. But then like you look back at it and it's like you can't remember a time where The Godfather wasn't hailed as the masterpiece that it is. And
this is, I can't, I'm trying to remember what movie from our first season that we were talking about where it seemed like it always existed, it always was. That's this movie too. Like the term The Godfather didn't exist. Like that wasn't a thing even within organized crime or in Italian American society. It wasn't as much of a thing as it is until this movie came out. And now that's just what it is.
Right.
That is part of our culture now.
Absolutely.
Because of this film.
And it's like, it's silly to list all the influences because, you did it. And it's like every mob film, even a mob film that says, yeah, we wanted to get away from The Godfather. You don't. You're using something.
It in some way, yeah. Tarantino does it. Anybody who has a scene with stylized violence does it. I'm picturing Reservoir Dogs with the ear, like it's off camera, but you know that it's happening and it's influenced because there are things that happen in this film that are horrific, but we don't necessarily see them, we understand them.
Right.
Sonny being shot, who hasn't seen that scene and been like, oh man, that's how you do somebody getting gunned down. I mean, that's even more so than Westerns or anything like that. It's just so visceral and it's so impactful. It's insane. I feel like we have to talk about the horse head scene because it's upsetting to me.
It is. I
completely
that's the one
understand
scene.
it.
That's the one scene where it's like I get like this is to show the lengths and how vicious, vindictive, and cold-blooded they are. But yeah, it does. Like after that scene, it's like I remember having like there were jokes about it. When I was a kid. There was one moment when I was a kid and like it was either my father or my brother had chicken wings and put the bones
in your bed?
in the couch.
Oh, in the couch.
And I was lying in the couch and I felt it and I went to go and I'm like and my mom was looking at me and she just started laughing. She's like, it reminded me of the scene in The Godfather when the horse's head. And I didn't know what they were talking about until I saw it. But
you're like, okay,
now I watch it and I'm like, even when I watch it with someone, like watching it with Robin or watch it with someone that hasn't seen it or doesn't know much about it, afterwards I'm always like, that feels wrong now.
Yeah. Well, especially because Coppola didn't want it. It was in the novel. And he's like, all right, yes, this is a very good illustration of it. But what bothers me about
it's a real goddamn horse's head.
It's a real horse's head. And, I told Rachel that, and she's like, they killed a horse? And I was like, they didn't kill a horse. It was a dead horse. They had rehearsed it with a fake horse's head every time, and then for the actual filming, they got a horse's head from a slaughterhouse, and it was a dog food plant because there's horse meat and dog food. That's what it is. However, you didn't need to use a real horse's head. You could have used a fake one because that actor's reaction is real. He didn't know there was going to be a real horse's head in his bed. So when he pulls off the sheets and sees it, he's like, whoa! And I'm sure he's like, Frank, what? Why did you do that to me? That is horrible.
Right.
And Coppola's defense of it is, well, I mean, people are all upset about it, but then they still give their dog food, so what's the difference? The difference is you used a real horse's head in your movie, bro. You didn't need to do that. It's like method acting.
Yeah.
You don't need to do it. Ugh. And like you can see it, like when the close-up, you can see it. It's a lot. And it's
just
upsetting.
a beautiful, innocent horse.
I know.
Whatever. Filmmaking, before we wrap up.
Oh, of course.
You know, I remember watching a roundtable with several directors, and the interviewer said, you know, what's a movie that you watch for inspiration? Because, you know, I remember interviewing Robert Zemeckis, and he said, before I direct a movie, I always watch The Godfather. And all the directors laughed and said, well, you know, that would make me not want to direct a movie, because why? And
I can't live up to that.
Spielberg has said that, you know, after he saw The Godfather, he was like, well, I'm quitting. But like, there's so much you can take from this film in just terms of, you know, one, designing a scene, the use of violence, just the confidence in the storytelling itself of just always knowing what your theme is, where you're going, why a character's doing exactly what he's doing, when he's doing it, and what it's leading to. You know, it is a film that you watch and you're like, Jesus, like, what else is there to do? But it is a film that you look at and you're like, okay, there's a wealth of information in it.
Yeah.
And
If you're a cinematographer, you watch the cinematography.
Yep.
If you're a writer, you pay attention to the dialogue and the scene structure and everything else. I read a thing that in his draft, Coppola put Clemenza brown sausage. And Puzo reads it and he crosses it out, and in the margins he writes fries. Clemenza wouldn't brown sausage; he would fry it. Just that attention
Little
to
details.
detail, and then of course the performances and the direction and the lighting, everything. Like, if you are interested in filmmaking, start with The Godfather, and then give up, because you'll never make that. But if that's your benchmark and that's what you're going for, you will continue to make great films, trying to make something as good as The Godfather.
You know, even just watching that special feature of that Notebook, and, you know, I saw that and I'm like, okay, that's what I got to do.
Yeah.
And I try to do it, and sometimes, like, I get to it, I'm like, Jesus, man, this is a lot of work and patience and time to go into this. But sometimes, like, you do see the benefits of it, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially,
your director book for Northland was extensive. I was like, damn, dude, but I get it. I get it. You're going for greatness. A couple small trivia things that we haven't talked about yet that I want to do before we're done. The line that everybody knows. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. Improvised. That's not fair. That's not fair. That line needs to be written. That needs to be in the script, but instead it's an actor going, oh, this would be good. I'm going to say this. When Clemenza's going up all the stairs and he's all winded, it's because he and Coppola got in an argument. And Coppola just made him keep doing that over and over again. He's like, we need another take. And the poor actor's a big man, and he goes up and down those stairs, so that's why he's so out of breath when he gets to the top, because Coppola just made him do it over and over again.
He's something.
In the Johnny Fontaine character, while not based on Frank Sinatra, Sinatra took so much offense to it that I can't remember if it was Puzo or Coppola now, but he saw them in a restaurant and went up and got in his face and was screaming at him and saying that it was like defamation, he was going to sue and all this stuff. And it's like, it's not based on you, it's just you kind of happen to be similar to each other. Sorry.
Oh, blue eyes.
Oh, blue eyes. And that's it. That's all I got.
All right, something exciting. You will have a chance to see The Godfather on the big screen at Palace 9, or if you go to Fathom Events and type in your zip code, it will tell you exactly where you can go to see it. And that is June 4th and June 7th, 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock, 2 showings. And oh my God, just the new restoration that they did for this looks gorgeous and beautiful, and just to have the experience of seeing it on the big screen is really going to be something.
Yeah, I hope I can go.
Please go!
I hope I can go. Also, if you want to watch it online, you can find it in all the usual places, iTunes, whatever, for $3. And if you've never seen it, go see it, find it, borrow it. Here, you can have mine. Borrow it. You need to watch this movie.
If you love films,
movies.
if you love movies, if you want to make movies, if you want to live and breathe movies, you know, you owe it to yourself to see The Godfather at some point, and you might as well start now.
Yeah. What do we got next week?
Next week, we are doing Some Like It Hot, one of my favorite comedies with a capital K. And that is also going to be a Fathom event that's going to be showing at Palace 9 later in June. And I'm really excited.
I've seen it once in high school.
Yay.
And from what I've heard, it's not as funny. It doesn't hold up. So I'm interested to see if I feel the same way.
I poo-poo that.
Well, I'm sure you do poo-poo it, but I feel like the gender politics of the film may not stand up to the test of time anymore.
We'll see.
We'll see. But I'm very excited for that. So thank you for watching and listening to Vermont Film Essentials this week. We will be back with Some Like It Hot. Be sure to go to our Instagram and follow us there, like our Facebook page, and yeah, just keep up to date with updates on the show. We got some fun stuff planned for this season, including maybe guests. Ooh. So
Someone
keep watching.
right
Yeah. So until then, I'm Lincoln Hayes.
I'm David Metzger.
Thanks. See you next time.